butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby, and twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body and mine. Baby, you get mine. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite.
Hey, Ralph.
Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh,
I sent you an email.
but I don't wanna jinx it, baby. Let's not get ahead of my time. Oh,
Can you hear me okay?
but I don't wanna
Yeah, I
jinx
can
it,
hear you.
baby.
Okay.
So I stand up and speak just my mind. Oh. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're chilling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight.
I think Noor put that on, and I didn't realize it had music. It was nice, but want to make sure that we're all here. We are live already, so don't say anything. Don't say any. No revealing of your plans to take over the world, Ming.
Drat, I'll keep that to myself.
Yes, that's right. We'll have to talk about that after the stream. Even though we're sort of in the back room, I want to introduce you guys to Ralph Moore. Ralph is the president and founder of MicroDigital. Say hi, Ralph.
Yeah, hi.
So these are a couple of the guys that come to the stream all the time. Umesh is owner of an IoT product company. He's based in Pune, and then Ming is a consultant who focuses mainly on Yocto Linux, and he's over in France.
Wow. What time is it there?
It is coming up. What's that? Coming up 4 o'clock
In
in
the
the
afternoon.
afternoon.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, the sun's barely rising here.
Yeah, Ralph's in California, which now is even an hour behind me.
Well, I mean, when this is finishes, it'll be 5 o'clock here. Time for margarita. It's all good.
It's amazing we can do this.
Yeah, every people all over the world. And Ming, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Aye.
And it's we were at 8 o'clock, so let's get rolling. So speaking of it being 5 o'clock somewhere, I can't believe it's already this is the last office hours before Christmas. So another year of dev heads. It's really great to be part of the community and have a bunch of friends we made around the world, as Ralph's pointing out, and hopefully making some new ones. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Brandon Lewis. I'm a technology journalist, and I've been in the industry about 14 years, I think is the accurate count. Today we're going to be talking about IoT, small to medium size OEMs, and whether some of the security regulations that we reviewed last week are going to choke out SMEs. I think it's a really interesting topic. It's one that's of obvious importance to a lot of us. A lot of the people here either work for or own a small to medium-sized business that supplies technology in the IoT space. And yeah, we'll see if things like the Cyber Resiliency Act, et cetera, are something that's navigable. And we really want to hear from you. Ralph Moore is with us, and he's got some different takes on it. You know, he's going to set the stage with a little bit of what's going on from the security perspective and what it means for you potentially as a IoT OEM. And then we'll dive into it and share some stories and hear about some real world experience. So this should be good. Before we go any further, I want to give everybody else a chance to introduce themselves. Ming, you want to go first?
So, hi, I'm Ming. So if we're looking, I started in this industry back in 1992, 93. So been playing around with Unix and Linux type things for well over 30 years now. Into the embedded space about 15 years ago, came down into the embedded space, enjoyed it, and decided to stick at this kind of thing, as it's more fun than playing with big servers.
What actually brought you down? Was it just a random project? Like, why did you decide to start working in the embedded ecosystem?
Random conversation with a friend who's saying, you do Linux, you can talk, do you fancy teaching about embedded Linux? And I went, yeah, okay.
Easy as that.
Yeah.
Umesh, you're next.
Hi everyone, I'm Umesh Lokhande from Pune, India. I've been building embedded software and hardware from past 10 years for IoT solutions.
Great. Ashraful Taj.
Hi everyone, I am Ashraful Islam Taj from Dhaka, Bangladesh, and I am pretty new in embedded systems. I am doing it since last 1 year around. That's it.
Good job. Florian, you want to say hi?
Hi everyone. So my name is Florian. I work at Congatech as a product manager. And for all of you who don't know Congatech, we develop so-called computer modules. So yeah, deep embedded hardware.
Sorry about that. Wafa, your turn. If you're there, you're muted. All right. Well, we'll sacrifice you and move on. So, like I pointed out, so today's topic is whether or not small to medium-sized IoT OEMs can survive some of the cybersecurity regulation. Last week, Chris Melville and Florian as well joined us to talk about specifically the UK cybersecurity regulations, which is really similar to a cyber resiliency initiative that's happening in the EU more broadly, and then a similar type of effort that's going on in the States, and that's something that Ralph will touch on a little bit here in a second. So we need to make sure that that we completely understand these things, and a lot of times when regulations happen, they tend to be pointed at larger organizations or trying to make sure that companies who are shipping in volume or at scale are good citizens, right? But of course, the regulations impact everybody. So that poses a really big challenge to a company who is specialized and maybe just has a few people working at it to cover some of the requirements that are enabled by these or produced by some of these regulations becomes really onerous if you're a small to medium-sized enterprise, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So to do that, we've got Ralph Moore. Ralph's a gentleman that I've known for quite some time. He is the founder and president of MicroDigital. He has spent a lot of time in his career working on real-time operating systems, but specifically secure real-time operating systems. Now, he did want me to make a note that he is not a security expert per se, right? So he's going to be looking at this from the embedded systems, the IoT OEM perspective, and sharing what he's seen in the market and how he thinks that this is going to impact him and his business, and then a lot of the other folks on the call, your businesses too. So without much further ado, there's his bio, and I'll let you read for yourself, and then we'll share these slides in the server. I'm going to hand it over to you, Ralph. You've got some things to go through. Why don't you take it away?
Okay, well, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm not a security expert. My security knowledge is due to studying security the last few years while developing a new high security RTOS that we call Secure SMX. So those of you who may know more about security than I do, feel free to correct me later on after we finish this talk. See, I guess we go to the first slide. Oh, there we are. Okay. The security, and I use security, I should say cybersecurity, but at any rate, this initially was in the IT area, which is business information, such as financial, customer records, etc. And security in IT probably goes back about 5 decades. At that time, OT was what's called air-gapped, and now OT is manufacturing, utilities, hospitals, pipelines, etc. So the security techniques and so forth have been around for a long time. But about maybe 2 decades ago, they started connecting the OT to IT, and then problems started happening. Hackers got into IT and then went across into OT, or vice versa. At any rate, security now is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I say here with hundreds of companies. It seems that way to me. Maybe there's only 100. I don't know, but it's a very complicated area. So in recent years, OT is being targeted more and more often, and the recent exploit of the pipeline on the East Coast is a good example. Okay, so IoT devices fall under OT. What's been happening in recent years is the low-hanging fruit of phishing, credential theft, privilege escalation, etc., are being eliminated by the security companies. The manufacturing and other companies are becoming more security aware. So as these easy paths start to disappear, oh boy, what happened there? I lost my slides. How do I get them back, Brandon? Okay, there we go. The exploits of vulnerabilities are becoming an increasing problem. One thing I find in the security reading is that there's a lot of difference in the statistics, and it's hard to really get solid information, but it looks like vulnerability exploits are about 20% now, or as high as a third. So the phishing and other things are still the dominant thing. However, I'd like to say here, kind of as an aside, that embedded systems or IoT devices have long lifetimes. They typically 10 years. We have some customers that are still using the same devices for 20, 25 years. So, my feeling overall is that the IoT or embedded vendors, OEMs, really need to be building security into their products now, because these exploits are just simply getting worse and worse. Going on to the next slide. The vulnerabilities are reported to the National Institute of Standards, and it prepares CVE reports. You're probably all familiar with this. These are maybe 4 or 6 page reports that describe the vulnerability, give some examples, and then assign a serious, a number that indicates how serious it is. We call these CVEs. So as of now, there are almost 240,000 CVEs. Now, that's really hard to grasp. That's a huge number of vulnerabilities that have been reported and documented, recorded, etc. And this problem is getting worse rapidly. The latest number I saw was 52,000 new ones in 2024 alone. Of these CVEs, about 30% have what are called proof of concepts, which means that they can be exploited. So that means 70% are not worth fixing. Of the 240,000, about 6% have been exploited in the wild, as the security experts say. That amounts to 15,000 CVEs that have actually been exploited for various purposes. That's mind-boggling. Now, looking strictly at IoT devices, most of these CVEs are in the billions of IoT devices already shipped. That's a really serious problem there. I noted here, I guess Brandon put this a little out of order, but there's something like 800,000 white hat bounty hackers looking for vulnerabilities, and when they find them, they get paid an average bounty of about $3,500. Of course, big companies like Microsoft have huge staffs looking for vulnerabilities too. You learned last week about the UK law, which in my opinion is very draconian. I mean, it's the penalties are huge. I guess you discussed that last week. And the EU is working on something similar. In the United States, so far, NIST has issued the Secure Software Development Framework called the SSDF. And this derives from the 2021 cybersecurity order by President Biden. It's likely to become the basis for US laws and regulations. So this SSDF has 4 sections. The first is to prepare the organization. That means that the CEO and the C-suite must be fully on board, and they must consider security to be important, which is not the case now. Then this is expected to propagate down throughout the entire organization, so everybody becomes security aware. The next part is protecting the software. In other words, you need to have methods where outsiders can't access the source code and so forth, setting up protection. Then the third part is to produce well-secured software. So this means static testing and many other things. Finally, the fourth part is, I think, the worst, the most serious. Respond to vulnerabilities. So organizations are informed of vulnerabilities. They're supposed to figure out which vulnerabilities are in their firmware, in the case of IoT. And then they're supposed to develop a plan to fix the vulnerability. And they're supposed to notify their customers that they have the vulnerability. And this is when we're going to have the fix out to you, and this is what you should do in the interim. I think that's just totally overwhelming. Third item down here, basically 260 new CVAs per workday are being reported. of which 15 are being exploited. So you're supposed to figure out which of these apply to your firmware. And then, as I said, go through the process of figuring out how you're going to fix it, and etc. So the impact on this on companies is first of all, the cost. The security team, I think, as you can see, could be much larger than your development team. And to make matters worse, there's a shortage of qualified security experts to hire, and they're very expensive. It's a big problem to determine which CVAs are exploitable. Now, currently, IT and other large companies are wasting their time fixing vulnerabilities that aren't even exploitable. So if they don't know if the vulnerability is exploitable, how is a small to medium-sized company going to know? There's this thing called the known exploited vulnerabilities, the KEV. It's at least a year behind, and it's known to be incomplete. So these are some of the, I think, really serious problems with this particular approach to fighting this problem. So continuing with the impact on small companies, it's going to take a lot of manpower to determine which CVEs are in an OEM's firmware. It takes more manpower to patch the firmware and to deliver the updates to customers. Many IoT devices cannot even be patched. So what are you going to do then? The informing users of vulnerabilities, etc. One major company told its customers, just disconnect our equipment from the internet. That was their solution till they could figure out how to fix the problem. As we know, those of us who work in embedded systems and so forth, firmware, which I use for IoT devices and embedded devices, is more delicate than the software that's used in servers and applications and so forth. As we well know, a patch can easily introduce, there I did it again, okay. Can easily introduce a new bug. I mean, you see that time and time again when you're in development, that you add something here and something else doesn't work anymore. So this idea of taking working firmware and patching some vulnerability that may or may not be exploitable is kind of a dangerous idea. Once the firmware has been patched, I think, as we know, the unit should be thoroughly tested, and that might take days. Maybe you have to test it in a whole bunch of different situations, etc. So the new bugs introduced by fixing vulnerabilities could be worse than the vulnerabilities themselves. That's risky not to obey the firmware mantra. If it works, don't touch it. I think that's where a lot of IoT companies are today. Geez, it cost us an arm and a leg to get the equipment out there. We're not going to touch it. So the security problems for IoT OEMs, well, the security team could be larger. What happened here? I think we got...
Oh, I split it because there were a lot of bullets.
I think we got a repetition of that slide. We'll go on to the next one.
Yeah, it's two.
Yeah, you almost threw me off. So, many IoT devices cannot be patched. So what are you going to do? The thing I guess maybe I haven't made a good enough point of is that our governments around the world are moving toward this solution of patching and updating. And my opinion is it just flat doesn't work for IoT and embedded devices. As I say here, a patch can easily introduce a new bug. Takes time to test. It's okay. So I think we got that slide. Okay. So how bad is the problem? Well, as much as 80% of IoT firmware consists of components, which are mostly open source and peppered with vulnerabilities. That's the way apparently IoT software is being developed now. Back when I was more involved with it, we used to actually write our own firmware, but I guess that's no longer popular. So the components bring in other components with more vulnerabilities. So a study recently of several routers found an average of over 1,000 CVEs per device per router, and over 400 of those were rated serious or critical. Now, for the manufacturers of those routers, I mean, that's a huge problem. What are they going to do? And on top of this, we have what are called 0 days. Now, the 0 day, if you don't know, is a vulnerability that's being used before it's been publicized. So in other words, there's 0 days to fix it. Interestingly enough, the NSF and other state actors have large inventories of 0 days that they are weaponizing. Many have already been used to implant malware in systems, like we're concerned that Russia and China have planted malware in our infrastructure that they can set off any day they want. This malware hides until it receives an order from central command to spring into action. These 0 days are actually being bought and sold on black market, sometimes for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And large criminal syndicates are starting to use them. The 0 day use has grown from 25 to 50% of major recent exploits. So the patch and what I call the patch and put strategy doesn't work at all here. By the time you know about this vulnerability, it's already been used. These large syndicates are starting to use 0 days to attack hundreds of targets simultaneously. So I would refer you to this book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends, by Nicole Perlroth. It's a very disturbing book going on. So the situation that small to medium IoT companies face is that laws and regulations favor large companies. So, we have a situation right now where it's basically unregulated, but the regulations are coming. Large companies can afford the cost to comply with the new regulations, and they have the power to influence the laws and regulations to favor themselves. As a consequence, small to medium companies will be forced out of business as these cyber regulations start to be enforced. And so, maybe we're 4 or 5 years away from the US having really strong laws and regulations. But as I said before, the lifetime of these IoT devices is 10 years or more. So companies really should be, designing secure devices now, not waiting until it becomes a problem. So reference here, as far as what happens is What Went Wrong with Capitalism, which is another excellent book you should read discussing this particular problem. So my solution, I believe that the solution for IoT companies is to use isolated partitions. As I said before, we've developed a high security RTOS that does exactly this. The basic idea is that the mission critical firmware is in the runs in privileged mode. And then all of this, the other firmware that's vulnerable, such as networking, file IO, and all these components are put into isolated partitions so that when they are breached, the malware can go no further. It cannot access anything in any other partition. And then if it does try to, memory management fault is generated and software or firmware can take over to shut down that partition, possibly reboot it to try to get it running again. And if it can't get it running again, at least the mission critical partitions continue operating and the crane doesn't fall over or, whatever. A big advantage of this is that, excuse me, it allows the security team to triage vulnerabilities. First of all, they don't have to do anything until they're actually breached. Then they can look at what partition is being affected and decide, is this a critical partition that we have to fix right away? Or could we postpone this one, etc. So that's my suggestion. And I guess we're ready for some discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. It's really good context there to set the stage, and I appreciate all of the different experience in your research and sharing that with us. Ming, I wanted to ask you in particular. We've been talking about SBOMs a lot, and that's obviously really beneficial when you're trying to track CVEs and KEVs. But for you and then anybody else, what's your experience with actually having suppliers report vulnerabilities? I mean, is that, Ming, I'm assuming you just go check the CVE database. You're not really getting notified that often.
Because I've got my SBOM, okay, it helps me. I build my entire system myself. So I know every component that goes into my system. And so I can just go in and I'm regularly checking against the CVE database. Every time I do a build, which is probably 2 or 3 times a day, I'm getting a list of all of the CVE or the known CVEs for any component within my system.
And then I guess more abstracted up at the product level, Umesh, what happens here? What happens on your side? You guys have IoT solutions that you're shipping into the market. If there is an exploit of a component that you have within your stack, what does that process look like? I mean, are people notifying you, or is this something that you're, having to monitor on your own? Umesh? I don't know if he can hear us.
There he is.
Hey, Umesh.
Yes, I think.
Can you hear us?
The audio is lost.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we'll wait until Umesh gets his audio back. But yeah, I do think I'd be interested to hear from you, those of you guys who are in the audience. If you're building or working on a product.
By the way, Mr. Rolf, I have one question. Like, very often in our company, we talk about security internally discuss, but then the question comes very often to us is that who is responsible for this, right? So whether the CEO himself has to take care of that, whether it's a manager, like where it goes, like CTO, where it goes. And very interestingly, we end up sitting up together and finding out the solution with the approach of securing the firmware from the hardware perspective, because we believe that we could able to architect the framework where we can put a security layer through the hardware. I'm not sure whether this approach makes a sense, but we usually do this. So
You're saying that you put the security in the hardware?
no, we approach security from the perspective of hardware.
Oh,
So let's say if you want to secure it, one is a software approach where you, let's say, buy a proprietary piece of software and then put run on the top of it onto the microcontroller, say for example, and then secure it. And in the microcontroller perspective, you can put up, let's say, an hardware layer from the hardware security perspective from the bootloader itself.
okay. Well, do your devices have a connection to the internet?
Yes, we do have the connectivity to internet.
Okay. So then what if a hacker comes through the internet and uses a vulnerability in that firmware to implant some malware? What are you doing about that?
I haven't had such an experience as of now, but
Mm,
just in because fortunately it didn't happen to me yet. Okay, um, but yeah, partitioning is one way,
uh-huh.
like how we can separate the piece of softwares. You can have an architecture with a multiple core. I mean, it depends like what kind of code it is, whether it's without operating system altogether, bare metal, or the
Uh-huh.
code is using a sort of RTOS running on it. So depends.
I see. So I didn't get the question. What was the question?
My question was like in the ideal scenario, because I come from India at the moment and we don't have such an active discussion around the IoT security at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So if let's say you sit and design, if you decide, okay, let me make EU compliant, okay, or maybe you want to follow all these guidelines and everything, who is the person who is wholly responsible for that security implementation? Because right now everybody sit together and finding out what could be an appropriate solution, so everybody gives input right now.
Well, that's probably good. I think what the security industry is concerned about is that the IoT device manufacturers keep saying nobody's willing to pay for security. So security costs money, so we're not going to put it in our devices because it's not economical for us. And so CIST is saying, well, we got to change that attitude from the top down. So we got to get the CEO and the CTO and all these people at the very top to say, okay, we are going to design secure devices from now on. And then it's supposed to propagate down to the people doing the actual work.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
Yes. And I think I observe one more issue with that is who, let's say when you write a proposal for the project, who gonna compensate that money that's go as an investment for securing a product, right? Because it would not considered as in the project hours. It will be outside the project hours, which probably for the client that you are designing a solution may not consider that outside of the hours that you
Well,
put in to build solution.
well, see now, if the CEO and on down are committed to security, then it's going to be in your project hours. You're going to allocate resources to make that device secure. And the top management is saying, you know, if it's not secure, you're fired. You're out of here. But that's not happening now. Now they're saying, you know, it's like hiding their heads in the sand. They're saying, well, nobody will pay for it, so we're not going to do it. And that's really self-defeating, because 5 years from now, it's going to be extremely important whether devices are secure or not. I mean, you saw this UK law is positively draconian in the penalties, huge multi-million-dollar penalties, and prohibiting the sale of that equipment in the UK. And, you know, I'm amazed that they think they can do that. I don't think that they're going to be able to, there's going to be too much outrage. And then the EU is going the same direction, and the US is not far behind. So the thing is, I think companies should be getting aware now that this is really a big problem and it needs to be dealt with now.
Yes.
I have two thoughts on this. The first is, I think we touched on this a little bit last week, like with GDPR, is like how enforceable really is this? I mean, there's so many companies and so many different components in play here that, the enforceability of this universally is not really practical. So that's number one. But then the second thought is, if you really do plan to try to make this universally enforceable or something like that, does this almost require that we have standard implementations of essentially almost everything, so that there's some hope of potentially being able to collectively identify and remediate vulnerabilities? And I'd like to hear anybody's thoughts about that. What do you think, Ralph?
Well, you have some standards. You have, the MISRA and CERT and static testing. I don't know how many of you do static testing, but you do have some design standards already. My thought is that despite these standards, the vulnerabilities are still being discovered. And, I really think the only way to deal with this problem is through isolation. And as I mentioned, which was really a big shock to me, that in general, IoT OEMs are downloading large amounts of open source software that are called components, and using those in their systems. And these are just loaded with vulnerabilities. So let's say for an OEM to go through each component it downloads and fix all the vulnerabilities, that's something only large companies can afford to do. So I think the best solution is just simply isolate those components. And if they get breached, then too bad, you lose that function, which hopefully is not critical. That's the basic idea.
I want to ask Florian this, in a second, but Ming just brought up an interesting point, and I think I have a response, but I don't know how bulletproof it is. So Ming says, if I were to create a device, and at some point later there's a vulnerability that gets discovered, Ming has to report it, but who's going to pay for him or somebody? Who's going to pay for it to be fixed, right? And I mean, I think that the obvious answer is the device manufacturer. Now, whether or not they're willing to do that, especially for a product that's already shipped, that's what I mean. What are you going to do for? I mean, we're going to have recalls on products and then force them to pay Ming. I wonder what that looks like. Is that something, I imagine, Ming, you just write into your contract? Like, what do you like? Do you have the equivalent of support contracts that you write in now?
Not at the moment, but I'm looking at having my contract rewritten based on some of the things I'm just looking at.
Yeah.
Because that whole concept of, if I'm supplying a service or something to my client, then there is potentially that ongoing liability 5 years down the line.
Right.
I'm not going to be doing it for free.
Right. So I wonder here, like, I think that based on the conversations we're having, it seems like the chain of liability passes all the way, could pass all the way through, right? From the smallest component all the way to the end product. In your work, do you what do you guarantee anything, Ming? I mean, you're not necessarily supplying an actual like component, like, you know, like an RTOS, like Ralph is, right? But do you provide any, like, what do your contracts look like?
My contracts are more about my time and materials, but then
Right.
I do have business liability insurance that would hopefully at least cover me for my liability.
Yeah.
You hope.
Yeah.
We have the
It's
same
insurance,
thing.
so they're going to work out how they can not pay, but yeah.
My opinion of insurance is you don't know what you have until you need it.
Yeah.
And then they try to do everything not to pay you. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, you said you had how do you determine CVEs in your code? You said you had some software or something?
Because I build Yocto Linux project systems, there's an automatic process as part of the build of my entire operating system that will go and do a check against the CVE database.
Oh, okay. And does that tell you whether the CVE is exploitable or not?
It will return the full CVE details, including its criticality scores.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, what I then have to do as a result of that is go through all of those and work out myself manually what is actually relevant. Because, for example, there was things on for the Linux kernel that I'm using, it was coming back with there is a vulnerability in the particular graphics card device driver that is exploitable. And I'm going, fine, but I don't actually have that graphics card. But even though the vulnerability is exploitable, my system isn't, because I'm not using that component. So that's the level of detail that you have to then go down to as the post build analysis.
Well, how much of your time is being consumed by this?
For me personally, probably very little, because I've automated all of it.
Oh,
So,
okay.
not only have I got a system whereby it is checking against every time I do a build, it only notifies me when there is a change. So it only notifies me for a new vulnerability.
Oh.
So I'm then, even though I've got this list of 100 potential vulnerabilities, but I spent 3 days going through them all, and I've worked out that one is actually, the only one is potential. The other 99 are irrelevant. So I'm not having to redo that entire check every build. I can just go, oh, right, I've done a build. Although there's a new thing flagged up, I can just go and have a look at that one new thing.
Now, what about 0 days? How are you handling those?
In terms of until I know about it in the CVE system, or for some of the 0 days, if I've found out about it through social media or whatever, then because I've got my software bill of materials, I can go and check immediately, is my system vulnerable? So, for example, the XZ or XZ vulnerability, when that was announced against the particular versions, within a few minutes, I'd already pulled up my SBOM and gone, actually, we're not using that version. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to go back to sleep.
I see. Well, I think you're doing a much better job than almost anybody else in the IoT business. If everybody were doing the job you're doing, there probably wouldn't be a big problem.
I'm fortunate. Because I deal with a Linux system, so it's a higher level. We've got a lot more tools built into the system and built into our processes, because we've been doing it some time, for quite a bit of time.
Well, this is where I was going with. I wonder if we're barreling towards a standard type implementation. I mean, you don't say that like ANDA or some of the things in ARM are necessarily a standard, but I mean they're getting close to being de factos, right? And if there's a standard process that can be recommended, right? And I can see that being part of part of the like checklist for some of these regulations, right? It's like, okay, did you follow this recommended best practice, right? Which includes A, B, C, D, E guidelines. Yeah, that seems like it might be something that could be put in place to help this scale a little bit. But then again, like, the enforceability of this becomes crazy.
As Zacck is pointing out in the comments, that this is also available through some of the CI tools. Do you want to elaborate on that, Zacck?
He's still trying to figure out how to use the platform.
No, I know how to use this thing. I don't have video today. I don't know why. Somebody's going. So Ming is okay. So Ming's been working on stuff that's been working for a long time. So he has the privilege of having Yocto, which is his own build, to tell him about CVEs. However, if you're not using Yocto to build, say maybe you're building firmware for microcontrollers and such, there's tools and CIs that can tell you. There's things like dependabot and such that will tell you, that will find CVEs that are linked to your dependencies, which are the libraries you use, and they will inform you, and then you can fix it. So the service is available. It's just that if you're not doing Yocto stuff, you have to take the product to integrate it into your build process. This Yocto has it inbuilt off the get-go.
What was one of those CI tools you said you mentioned, Zacck, so I can put it in the chat?
I think so. You'll find a CI tool. There's things like traditionally you'd use something like Circle CI. I think GitHub has their own right now, and they're really just containers that feed into other containers. They're multi-stage containers, really. You could do this without. And then there's also, like, I've seen I think one of our DevEd members makes a version for embedded devices, which is EmbedOps as well. That's also a CI tool. Yeah. So
there's Black Duck again.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this. So you'll find this tool, and this tool will usually have a plugin that finds CVEs against your library. So the tool itself might not do it, but there will be a piece of software, or there could be a way to just do some automation and find CVEs against your library, because it's a hugely demanded feature for the last few years, I think, since CVEs have been being collected. But yeah.
I'm going to start triangulating something here. Watha, you raised your hand. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Hello, everyone. So actually, I wanted to ask, what are the methods you're using to secure your embedded systems, or maybe to test how secure your embedded system is?
I'm going to skip that real quick because I think I might be able to create a discussion around something similar. So Ralph said that he's using isolation and partitioning, and I swear this wasn't planned. But Florian and his company create a solution called A-Ready, which is essentially a hardware software stack that uses containerization to partition and modularize the system build. And I don't know how many of you went to that event last week, I think it was, where we were talking about medical device security and how how people are developing now and some of the challenges around that. And Sean Prestridge said, security is really about slowing down the attacker, right? It's not, we're not talking about necessarily stopping them. We're talking about slowing down the advance of that attack. And it kind of seems like here the industry is starting to move. All three of these individuals too are not as far as I know. I mean, you guys may know each other some way that I'm not aware of, but you're totally different parts of the industry and focus on different things. One's tools, one's RTOS, one's hardware. The approach seems to be consolidating around isolating, and modularizing the build, right? Trying to contain potential exploits and vulnerabilities as much as possible, and then just buying yourself enough time. To Ralph's point earlier, if the vulnerability ends up being exploitable or exploited, buying yourself enough time to say, okay, well, maybe if we need to go back and remediate this, we can later. Does that seem like that seems like it might be the state of the art today, right? What do you guys think? Florian?
Yeah, well, I can just agree with that, because you always need to try to separate your systems, and also try to separate as much as possible, because back in the days before I got into my first jobs, for example, before everything was connected, you had security because OT was really air gapped from IT. So you already had it, and now you have this convergence. So OT and IT, they're moving closer together, and you get a lot of more potential attack vectors here. So getting this separation now within your systems is crucial, because you can't just air gap your OT anymore, because that's also not the solution nowadays, because you have a lot of advantages by connecting all your devices. For example, data collection, you can use then for improving the efficiency in your production facilities and stuff like this, because you really don't want to air gap them anymore, but you still need to somehow try to separate those systems as much as possible. And therefore, separation on a hardware level, it's a really good solution here.
The other thing is it obviously makes it easier, if you integrate a CI tool and you're able to, sort of do some scans like what Ming has put in the chat through Black Duck software, you end up with a situation where things are isolated. It may be easier to pull out, where that vulnerability is arising, because you've got a partitioned, isolated system that's broken into smaller, digestible chunks from a development standpoint. You sort of think about the digital system as a physical system, just the way that we've been handling physical security, just in a different form. Ralph, were you going to say something?
Oh, I agree with you. I really think isolated partitions are the way to go. And for MCU systems that cannot run Linux and I guess use these sophisticated tools, I think we have a big problem right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there was another question. Taha, did you have something you wanted to ask or add?
Yeah, so from my background, I'm coming from network security, and what we usually do is we build around the detection systems of vulnerable for attacks and firewalls, etc. But recently, there's a lot of room and discussions around the use of AI, where we monitor the network for any usually the attacks or vulnerabilities are detected by signatures when there's something uncommon. We know the signature of an attack and we classify it as an attack. But for 0 days, what we're doing recently is we were using AI to classify or detect outliers. And even if we don't know the 0 day exactly what it is, we can classify it as a vulnerability or outlier, and we start acting up on it and detecting what is it exactly. And in this context, in IT and embedded, is there room to use such system or a way of thinking or use of AI in detecting vulnerabilities or new outliers, or maybe even detecting 0 days?
I think when you start, this is sort of the point here. It's if you're now what Ralph just said, if you're developing a Linux-based systems with a ton of memory or whatever, there may be an avenue here. But if you're developing a microcontroller that has very, very limited memory, right? I mean, and you're asking to add like an agent or something, which is what it sounds like you're talking about, an agent on device that can monitor the behavior of the system. Or I know that there are some tools from like UltraSoc. There are some like IP vendors that do the equivalent of like security watchdogs on chip, right? But somebody's got to pay for all of this stuff, right? And it's either you're going to pay for it in the time of optimizing your code, you're going to pay for it in having more memory, you're going to pay for it in having some sort of technology that is, you know, built into the hardware potentially. So like AI or not, I think it's you start getting to a point with some of these systems that this whole conversation is about who's going to pay for this, right? I mean, really, that's what most conversations come down to, right? And I don't know that we have a clear answer outside of some sort of like tax or like some sort of federal, you know, but here it's not even federal; it's regional, required like some fund. I don't know, some like social sort of monetary fund to help ensure companies can do this. I'm not sure. Have anybody heard of anything like that? Like Florian, Ming, any sort of like tax that would go into effect or anything to help support this? I guess it's called other things called fines.
Not come across anything.
Yeah, interesting.
One thing I'd say is that to directly answer the question is it's quite possible to have an event buffer in the device, and the RTOS, for example, can be recording, you know, what's going on, task switches, all this kind of stuff. And this can periodically be uploaded to the cloud where AI software can then be looking for something that's not within the normal pattern. So I think that's quite practical to monitor IoT devices that way. And so what we need to do is to build in this event monitoring in the device itself, and we just need to figure out, well, what's important, what needs to be recorded in this event buffer.
That's interesting. And then, I mean, if you have cloud connectivity, in theory, you could put the onus back on the government or some bigger entity, right? Some centralized entity who's running an AI that's job it is to sort of track it and, you know, monitor all of the behavior that's happening on the endpoints. It's an interesting architecture.
Well, this kind of thing I think is already being done, and it would be the end user, the large corporation, let's say, that has thousands of IoT devices connected to its networks, and then it would be paying for some security company to be monitoring everything.
Yep.
But that's a good way to maybe detect the 0 days. Also, it should be recognized that, you know, CIST is practically a year behind on CVEs. So those are kind of like 0 days too. You know, I mean,
yeah. I don't know. I guess Ming's connected egg timer, you're going to have to pay for the monitoring of all of those endpoints, Ming.
Well, I was going to say, we actually do something within the patch that we've got, so the actual medical patch that goes on the patient, very similar to what Ralph is describing. We have a log buffer, and then periodically we will download that log buffer back up to the cloud, where at the moment we're using it for debug analysis.
Yeah.
What's actually been going on with the device itself. But it's a very short leap of the imagination to go from debug analysis to security analysis, because it's got the information there, as you're saying, all of the context switches, what devices have been brought on, when they've been brought on, how long they were on for. So all of that event data is within that log buffer.
How often are you pulling that now?
At the moment, we pull it on request.
Okay.
Because, as you're saying, there is a cost. There is the cost of, we need a little bit more storage on our device. There is the cost of the bandwidth to actually pull it from the device. Therefore, there's a cost of battery life in order to actually get that log off the device. So we're not doing it as a matter of course.
Yeah. Ralph, how quickly did you say that some of these like how what was the response time you said? Didn't you say at one point it was a 24-hour response time was required for something back in your slides?
I don't think so.
There's the 24-hour response time is required by the Cyber Resilience Act in Europe. That once you know of a vulnerability, you've got 24 hours to report it.
Yeah. Is that
Yes.
accurate for him?
Yes.
Well, that's quick.
So for your one-man band, basically, you're not allowed to sleep.
Right. Well, also, I mean, the reality is that creates a don't ask, don't tell situation, right? It's like, okay, well, I didn't know. So, yeah. Okay.
Why incriminate
Here's to
yourself?
prove it.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, that was some really good stuff. I appreciate your input, Ralph, and then Florian too. Thanks, Ming, as always. Zacck, I think your hand was still up. I don't know if it's because you meant for it to be up or not. Did you want to jump on and tell us about your progress on the RTFES at all? You were muted and then unmuted and muted again.
I am on. I just can't figure out where my video is going. That's the problem.
Okay.
Anyways, so on RTFES, we have the first prototype of the product running, and it's been running for the last few hours. I had to stop it at some point today, and so that I could make a startup service, like a systemd service, on the flashing machine, which is a Raspberry Pi. And other than that, it's been running pretty okay. It does have some glitches in the you do lose video every few minutes or something, but it delivers the bins and it streams back.
Is it running now? Is it up? Is it online now?
It's always online.
Hold on, let me see if I can share this. Or do you want to share it?
No, there's too many. This is why I don't have video. I have like 3 WebRTC things happening from like machines in my network.
Jack, is the system is running, then maybe I can
flash.
Share my screen and try it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, then just give me a minute. Let me.
Well, I've got it here. Can you guys see the screen?
Are you sharing it? Cool.
Yep.
So,
yep.
You need to press watch stream. If in the next item, this.
I was just making sure everybody can see it.
Oh? Okay, cool.
So this is RTFES, guys. So for those of you who haven't seen it, so this is basically what we're doing is we're uploading a bin to a target in.
Can I interrupt a bit?
Sure.
Okay, so I have a ready firmware who is controlling the LED on board, so I can show that demonstration if you want.
If you want to do it instead of me, that's fine.
Okay, just.
I'm so scared.
Okay. My screen is visible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I already.
This view is way better than my view was.
Okay, so I already selected my binary, and let's turn on the stream, so we can see the hardware in real time. Okay, Jack, no video.
Yeah, it does have
now.
A few seconds.
Okay. So when I I can click upload firmware and it is uploaded. It will take around 30 seconds, I guess, because.
Oh, you even know how many seconds? Wow.
I tried like last night a few times, and it was around that time.
Yes. Okay, cool. So the thing that is flashing right now is the bin that Brandon uploaded, because that's, if you look, I can share the code into that. If you look into that bin, it's just 3 timers, and I think it will. Yeah, that we are getting a new flash.
Okay, so this is my firmware. So I uploaded this one. Yes. Yeah.
You have a different one?
Yeah, it's my own.
You have a different one other than this one.
Yeah.
Is Marvin around? He was making something with Zephyr. It should work as well.
So Ralph and anybody else who doesn't understand what's going on here, basically that platform is that ST board is in Cape Town where Zacck is. Zacck, I don't know if you're by it and you can put your hands in front of it and let everybody know. I think we did. Yeah, there you go. So this is like the early stage of being able to create a remote lab where we're allowing people. So big part of DevHeads is us creating what amounts to like demo projects that people can follow along with. And obviously at a certain point, people are going to need access to the hardware. And rather than having to like purchase and ship dozens of ST boards all around the world, it's easier to do it this way. So the RTFES platform is designed to allow people to upload their binaries right now. And then in the future, potentially do some debugging and other things of their project. So I'm not sure if Marvin's around, but either way, we'll take your word for it because we're 6 minutes over.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the challenges?
Yeah, so, okay, cool. So later today, we're going to announce the challenges since we've tested for quite a few hours and it's working. But I'm momentarily going to connect LED matrix, and then we'll start the first challenge, which will last, I think, a few days. And then we'll move over to the 4 degrees of freedom robot arm challenge through this thing. And yeah, that's really it. It's going to be simple and straightforward. We'll add, if you see, the next time you see the video with the updated hardware, there'll be more pieces of hardware in the view. So we have a wide enough space we can put it out. Yeah, that's really it.
Cool. So right now we've got to do this round robin, right? So I just put a link into a Calendly there. So if you guys want to take a spin at this by yourselves, you have some. If you want to do the challenge, let me know. Take a time on the Calendly there, and then we can make sure that it's partitioned out for you. You can use it in an isolated partition. Okay, well, does anybody else have anything that they want to add about the discussion today? Nope.
Okay, so like I asked a question earlier in the chat. So it was like the large companies, they are providing securities and they are telling like their system is secured, and later on, most of the time they use that data for advertisement. And like, what's your opinion on these things? Like they are making us secured, and also they are using our data by themselves.
Okay. Okay. I kind of get it.
I don't know if I understand the question.
Okay, so the question was like when I purchase, like there are so many home assistant things like Alexa and like Google Home. So they made their system secure, so the user can use their system, like really fine, and no one else can spoil their experience. But most of the time, what we saw, they use our data for advertisement. Like if I am talking about something and I open my Facebook and that thing popped up in front of me as an ad. So like, what's your opinion or perspective on this? It is like being secured and also not secured.
I think I can explain.
Yeah,
I think I understand what he's saying. Funnily enough, so it's he's trying to weigh between two options. As an end user, you can opt into security by way of whichever giant you choose. Apple, Netflix, whatever giant you choose is going to keep your data secure. But they're going to keep your data secure at the cost of them having your data. So
that's not a security thing. That's a data usage,
Yeah.
It's a different beast, and that's between you and your connected home device supplier. You know, there's a really interesting company that all of you guys should check out. It's called Ambient Enterprises on this topic, and then we'll transition out. So this company, Ambient Enterprises, thinks a lot, and the technical brain behind his name's Cotty Walcott. She's a friend of mine. She's really bright. The idea is that all of these organizations in the connected device era are just data harvesting, right? They're harvesting all of this data and monetizing it, but they're monetizing it based off of our actions. And at the beginning of the internet, all of us signed a social contract where we were sort of like, yeah, you want to give it to me for free? I'll give you everything about me, essentially indefinitely, to use however you want, right? And in the process of doing that, you know, we have made hundreds of billions of dollars companies like Amazon, Google. All of these companies are based on the fact that we've essentially aced them our data. Now, in Cotty's mind, we should be able to get some of that back, and there are some enabling some of that value back. And there are some enabling technologies that have come out in the past couple of decades that allow us to do this. So number one is a blockchain. So if you have a blockchain that could essentially manage a social manage a contract between you and a digital entity, right, in real time, what would end up happening is that you could have transactions take place between your digital self, right, the digital version of yourself, which has all the sorts of information about you, like a digital twin, and the company who wants to use that information for advertising or whatever, right? And this would lay the foundation for essentially a marketplace where you could exchange value, right? You exchange actual money by saying, okay, well, if Amazon wants to take my data and resell it to somebody else, here are the terms that I'm willing to accept under this kind of transaction. I'll sell data about my height, my weight, but not my age, right? And if that's what they're willing to buy, we have a marketplace where through the blockchain, there's an exchange, and then, they can go and sell it off. And the way she extrapolates this is really interesting. Talk about things like universal basic income and stuff like that. This is a pretty intriguing area. So not in today's discussion, sort of in the house next door, but definitely some interesting stuff that's happening, and it's possible with technology. So, but with that, I think we're through. We're 13, 14 minutes over. Sorry about that. I'm getting worse and worse at this. But I do want to say thank you so much, Ralph, and happy holidays, everybody. We will be back. I'm assuming it'll be a light crowd next Friday, but maybe we'll hang out and do some things where we're taking a look at those people who've used RTFES over the last week, seeing if they've had any challenges, any things that any suggestions, had broken it at all. And just keep building from there. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate the time, and we will see you in the server. All right.
Okay.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.